Okay, hey everybody, my name is David Wilson. I live in Lawrence, Kansas, and today I'm going to show you how I've been rolling cigars here. I've been doing this for about the last year or so. I used to use cigar molds, a lot like these wooden molds here. It would roll a little bit bigger ring gauge, but in the last couple months I've been rolling a different style of cigar, which I'm calling kind of a Petite Corona size with a pigtail cap, and I have been really enjoying these style of cigars. They're a lot quicker to roll, and I think the size is a lot better for getting great flavor, and you can actually get a really great draw out of these smaller hand roll cigars and just skip the molds. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how I do that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the wrapper. I'm using some Ligero wrapper, Ecuadorian Ligero, and I really like the flavor of this particular wrapper. So what I do is I moisten the wrapper ahead of time. I give it a few squirts with distilled water on each side and just make it pliable. Then I'll stick it in a bag overnight and let it really moisten up everything, and then when I take it out it's more pliable. I can stretch it out, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that woody stem, this midrib here. There's two things I use. One is a chaveta. This is actually just called an Alaskan ulu knife that I found online, but I also find it very effective sometimes to use a good old-fashioned pizza cutter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the midrib of this wrapper leaf and get this laid out. So I'm going to use just half of this, and the other half I'm going to use for later. So what I do is I wet my leaf a little bit, and I usually get the board kind of wet, and here I'm just using a walnut slab that I got out of the wood shop. You can use any type of cutting board that you want to designate for your cigar rolling. So what I'm doing is I'm moistening it. Now what I like to have on my wrapper is I do like to have it fairly moist, or what I would call in a high case. You want lower case or lower humidity on your filler leaf. That can be a little bit drier, almost crunchy, but not quite crumbly. But on the wrapper leaf, I like to make sure it's nice and moist and pliable, and just stretch it out. And one of the things that I also find is that the little leaves, the veins on the leaves can sometimes stick up and be somewhat prominent towards the middle of the leaf where the stem is. So this area here is pretty prominent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually cut that area out. Now you could use it. You can actually get two wrappers out of one half of a leaf, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to show you one wrapper out of one whole leaf. And I'm going to actually cut this little piece off there just to stretch it a little easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a strip here, and then we're going to end up using this portion, and I can save this offcut piece and it'll dry out over time. I use that for maybe a little extra filler in a cigar. So I'm going to continue to flatten this out, and now I'm going to go to my my filler material here. So I'm using three kinds of tobacco here today for my filler, and your blends will be completely different. But the one thing I have found is that it's very wise to use what most cigar blenders will use, which is a combination of a thinner leaf like a Volado for combustibility, a little bit thicker leaf like a Viso, Seco. As you go up the plant, it'll get thicker. That's for more of the body, the main body of the smoke. And then the Ligero, which I like a lot of Ligero personally, but I'm going to use a moderate amount here. This is more of the pepper, the spice, and it grows up to the top of the plant where the sun is the fullest. So if you use a little bit of each and vary your blends depending on how you like it to taste, that's going to give you the best cigar experience. So I'm going to cut out the piece here. I'll use this a little later. This is going to end up being the base of my cigar. Now what I've found in rolling hand-rolled cigars, you could do a quick bunch type of method and make it kind of sloppy and end up with a lot of scraps, but I have found using these little boards to be a very effective way to get an exact size. And you'll notice like some of these I have rolled to be an exact size. Today I'm going to roll a 5.5 inch, so I'm going to use my little board I've cut, a 5.5 inch, more or less a Petite Corona size. So the first thing I'm going to do, I use my ulu knife for this, is I'm going to cut the base or the start of my hand-rolled cigar. I got a couple offcuts here. This is going to be the beginning of my cigar. The next step, I go to my Seco, and I'm just going to cut out, I'll use a half of a leaf on this one. And again, the Seco is going to give me a little bit more of the aroma, the main body of the cigar. And one thing to keep in mind is when you roll a cigar, you always want the tips of the leaves to be at the foot of your cigar, which is right here. And this is where you're going to light the cigar. This end up here is, when I roll it, it's going to end up being the mouth, the part I put in my mouth where I'm going to do my pigtail. But here I'm going to go ahead and cut a middle piece out of this one as well. And actually on here, this whole leaf is about 11 inches long, so I can do two 5.5 pieces. That's another way to do that. And there I just went back and forth between my ulu and my pizza cutter, which is fine. So what I do is I start rolling kind of a modified entubado method where I'm rolling these tubes like straws. I don't want to roll them too tight or too loose, but I just roll them and then I set them down on that base, and I'll put something over the top of there. Set them down on that base kind of binder leaf, and you just roll these up a little bit. You can kind of overlap. And when I roll cigars, I always think about wanting to get tubes, like a bunch of straws in the middle, and that's, if I visualize it that way, that's going to give me the best airflow. Then I can go into using some of these offcuts, so I kind of flip them around and align the straight edge. And then I just sort of roll these in here, drop them down, so I have this nice straight edge on the outside. Put that in there, that'll be a little extra filler. Now I'm not getting too carried away. If you have a lot of offcuts, you can use them in here, but I find for the best draw, we're not going for a Cuban sandwich style cigar, which is just a bunch of scraps, because it really does inhibit the draw. So if I have a little bit of offcuts, that's okay. I'll just tuck them in there in the middle. Now I'm going to use my Ligero. This is all Nicaraguan leaf, by the way. Nicaraguan binder, Nicaraguan Seco, and Nicaraguan Ligero, but you can use whatever combination you want. And actually, I'm going to use both of these leaves because I like Ligero, and these are a little bit smaller. So here, I think I'll just kind of move to one end. You could do this however you want. You can cut out of the middle. Here I'm going to move to one end, cut that out, and let's see, maybe I'll do it a little different on this one. So these are, again, full 5.5 inch pieces, so I'm going to start rolling these. And then when I get into the middle, I start rolling it probably a little bit tighter, a little bit smaller rolls, just about the diameter of a straw. Lay that in there. Do my next one. Okay. And the main goal here is to make everything fairly consistent throughout. This method I like because it means there's not going to be a bunch bunched up in one area, not a big chunk or anything like that. So then I turn this around, and I can put, maybe I'll put one piece here. Again, this is my mouth end right here, and this is my foot end. So I always want my tip ends to go down there, and I'll just lay that right in there. Okay, now the next step is I'm going to go ahead and start rolling this up. Now when I roll, hand roll these small ring gauge, it's especially important to not get too tight but also not get too loose either. So it kind of takes a little practice over time. I'm just very carefully rolling this to make a pretty cylindrical roll right down the entire length, and then I can kind of do like that. And that's looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do is, this is my mouth end. I could just go ahead and cut both ends. I'm going to make that very even. Just cut a little ½ inch or so off of each side, and make sure that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to lay it right here, and this is again going to be my foot end. So I'm going to start rolling this up very carefully. Always cut a straight edge here. One of the things you can do is actually flatten those out. Here, I'm going to show you this briefly. Take a rolling pin and just kind of flatten those veins to make the whole wrapper leaf nice and flat. So I like that a little bit better. Okay, so now I'll go back to my wrapper here. I'm going to very carefully start to roll. You always want your cigar to line up with the veins, pretty much parallel on the way up. And I kind of pull and stretch here as I go. And I get a little ways up here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pizza cutter or my chaveta, either way, and I'm going to draw or make a kind of a hook shape here. Now this edge, I'm going to take this a little bit closer to my pigtail. Okay, if you can see that, that's the shape that we're going for to do a pigtail. Now I'm going to keep rolling here a little bit, and then I'll take a little bit of my cigar glue and just put a tiny amount there. It doesn't need much at all because the pigtail is going to hold this in place as well, and then just take it the rest of the way. Now when I get to that stage, what I can do is take my board and I kind of flatten this down in spots and make it nice and cylindrical throughout the whole length. And I find that this technique gives you almost the same symmetrical, cylindrical, and aesthetically pleasing cigar as if it was made in a mold. So again, when you get to this point, now I'm going to take my my part here for the pigtail, and I'm just going to start to wrap it around itself like this. And draw that out. If you can see that against the white of my shirt, I'm drawing that out, and then I'm going to tuck this and just kind of wrap it around and start tucking it under itself. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, I tuck it under itself and I keep twisting, and then when I get it wrapped around here a couple times or so, I'm just gonna, you can pull it off, this is what I usually do, but I'm just gonna show you how I cut it. Put it on a little board like that. Then I use my fingernail and I tuck that little off-cut piece under the pigtail with my fingernail. Okay, and there, that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to do one more roll with my board, and when I get it to length, put it in my my tuck cutter here, and just cut it to length where I want it. And there you have it. That's the Petite Corona size of cigar. And I might leave this out for a day or so before putting it, just to kind of dry, because the wrapper's wet, before I put it away in an old cigar box like that. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this video.